Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into habit formation.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, we'll be using James Clear's Atomic Habits, or at least some excerpts from it.
Okay, cool.
And really what we're hoping to do is extract those key insights that can help you, the listener, build better habits. Mm-hmm. And maybe break some bad ones too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Atomic Habits has so many insights, But I think what's most fascinating is how Clear emphasizes the power of tiny changes over time.
Right.
Like he uses this brilliant example, the British cycling team's transformation.
Yeah, that story totally hooked me too. Just remind me, how did they go from being kind of average to like dominating the cycling world?
Well, they adopted this strategy. It was called aggregation of marginal gains. And so they focused on making these 1% improvements in every single aspect of their training and performance. We're talking everything from the bikes to the athletes' sleep positions.
Really, it sounds almost too simple. Like, how much of a difference can like tweaking your sleep position really make?
Mm-hmm. I know, right? That's what's so incredible about it. Like, individually, these changes might seem small, right? Insignificant. But when you compound those tiny gains over time, the results, they're remarkable.
Okay.
It's like compound interest, but for self-improvement.
I like that. Compound interest for self-improvement. Okay. So I see how it works for a cycling team. Mm-hmm. But how does this 1% rule apply to like building better habits in our everyday lives?
Okay. Think of it this way. If you improve by just 1% each day for a year,
okay,
you'll end up nearly 37 times better by the end of it.
Wow.
But on the flip side, if you get 1% worse each day, you'll experience almost, complete decline.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, that's a powerful visual. It makes you realize how, like, those small choices we make each day really, like, they add up, right, over time.
They do.
But here's where I initially got tripped up. Clear argues that we should ditch the goals and focus on building systems instead. I mean, isn't having a goal important?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive at first, right? But Clear makes a compelling argument. Like, he points out that winners and losers often have the same goals. The difference, they're systems.
Sure.
Those consistent processes that support them in making progress, regardless of the specific outcome.
So it's not just about, like, reaching a specific destination. It's about creating, like, a framework that keeps us moving in the right direction, even when, motivation dips.
Exactly. Systems help you, like, play the game better.
Okay.
Even if the game changes or the goalposts move. Imagine a basketball player who focuses solely on winning a championship. Now imagine another player who focuses on, like, practicing their skills, improving their fitness, developing, like, a strong work ethic.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see the difference. So the second player is focused on the process, right?
Yeah.
Like on building those consistent habits that will ultimately lead to success.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they win that specific championship.
Right. They are building a system of atomic habits. Those tiny behaviors that compound over time to create remarkable results.
I like that. Okay, so...
And speaking of atomic habits.
Yeah.
Clear breaks down habit formation into 4 key stages.
Okay.
Cue, craving, response, and reward.
Okay, let's break down this habit loop. What's happening in each of these stages?
Okay, sure.
I know he uses that, like, cat puzzle box experiment by Edward Thorndike to illustrate it. Are we really that similar to cats trying to escape a box for a treat?
We might be more alike than we realize. So the cue. The cue is anything that triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. It's a signal that a reward might be on its way. This cue then sparks a craving.
Okay.
The motivational force behind the habit. You're not actually craving the habit itself,
right,
but rather the change in state it delivers.
So, for example, you don't crave, like scrolling through social media, you crave the distraction or the feeling of connection it provides.
Precisely.
Okay.
Then comes the response, which is the actual habit or action you perform.
Right.
Finally, the reward, the end goal of the habit loop. It satisfies your craving and teaches your brain whether this particular action is worth remembering in the future. Rewards help complete the cycle and determine if you'll repeat the behavior.
So to build lasting habits, we need to understand this 4-step process.
Yeah.
Cue, craving, response, and reward. But how do we actually apply this knowledge to our own lives? Like, where do we even begin?
Well, one of the most important things is to make the cue obvious. Clear shares this fascinating story about a paramedic who could, instinctively tell when her father-in-law needed medical attention just by glancing at him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, her brain had learned to recognize these, subtle patterns based on her years of experience.
That's incredible. So it's about tuning in to those subtle cues in our environment that are already influencing our behaviors. But how do we become more aware of those cues? I feel like I'm on autopilot most of the time.
Yeah. Clear suggests using a tool called the Habit Scorecard. It's simply a list of your daily habits where you score each one, helping you identify which are beneficial and which might be working against your goals.
Okay, so the Habit Scorecard helps us bring those like unconscious habits into conscious awareness. That seems like a crucial first step. But then how do we actually start building good habits or breaking bad ones?
Well, one effective strategy is using implementation intentions.
Okay.
It's about creating a concrete plan for when and where you'll perform a new habit. Clear calls this habit stacking, where you basically stack your new behavior on top of an existing one, tying your desired action into something you already do each day.
So if I want to start meditating each morning, I could stack it onto my habit of making coffee. After I brew my coffee, I meditate for 5 minutes.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Building on an existing routine takes away that, initial friction of starting something new.
Exactly. And speaking of friction, Clear emphasizes the importance of designing your environment for success. He talks about a study in a hospital cafeteria where they simply placed bottled water next to the food stations.
Okay.
It was a small change, but it led to a significant decrease in soda consumption.
So it's about making those cues for good habits, like obvious and visible.
Yeah.
While also reducing exposure to the cues that trigger bad habits.
Oh, got it.
Okay.
Make the best choice the easiest choice. But environment isn't just about what you can see. It's also about the context of your habits.
Oh, you're right. He discusses how, associating a particular habit with a specific context can make it easier to stick with it. He gives the example of only allowing yourself to watch your favorite TV show while exercising. I tried that, and it actually works.
That's a great example of temptation bundling. It leverages our desire for instant gratification. We're more likely to do something we need to do if we pair it with something we want to do.
This brings up a question I have about social influence. How our social circles impact our habits. Clear talks about the Polgar sisters, those incredible chess prodigies.
Yes.
And how their environment played a huge role in their success. Have you noticed that in your own life?
Absolutely. The Polgar sisters are a fascinating case study. Their father, he believed that anyone could be trained to become a genius.
Wow.
And he created an environment that fostered their chess mastery. They were constantly surrounded by cues and rewards that reinforced their chess playing. It highlights how much, our social circles and the cultures we belong to can shape our habits. We often adopt habits that are praised and approved of by our tribe because we have a deep desire to fit in.
That really resonates with me. I've definitely struggled with, healthy eating when surrounded by friends and family who weren't making the same choices. It's like an uphill battle.
It certainly can be. And it emphasizes the importance of finding your tribe, a community where your desired behavior is already the norm. It makes sticking to those good habits so much easier when you're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing.
Okay, finding our tribe is key. But what about those habits that we know are good for us but just don't seem appealing? How do we make those good habits more attractive? Aside from just surrounding ourselves with people who are already doing them.
Clear suggests a strategy called temptation bundling, which we touched on earlier. It's about pairing an action you want to do with an action you need to do. For example, only listening to your favorite podcast while exercising.
Right. So you're hacking your brain's reward system by linking something pleasurable with something that requires more effort. That's clever. But sometimes, even with temptation bundling, getting started with a new habit feels overwhelming. Any tips on making that initial step less daunting?
Absolutely. This is where the 2-minute rule comes in. It states that when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
Wait, so instead of aiming to run 5 miles, I should just focus on putting on my running shoes? Seems almost too easy.
It does, right? But the point is to master the habit of showing up. Once that initial step is taken, it's much easier to continue building on it. Instead of trying to do it all at once, you're focusing on making that first action mindless, removing that barrier to entry.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like that saying, well, begun is half done. But what about those times when, despite our best efforts, we find ourselves slipping up? How do we get back on track quickly?
Well, the key is to never miss twice. If you slip up one day, you gotta get back on track immediately. Don't let a small slip turn into a downward spiral. Think of it like those tiny 1% declines we talked about earlier. One missed day might not seem like much, but those misses, they can accumulate quickly if you're not careful.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's easy to fall into that all or nothing thinking. But allowing yourself some grace and focusing on like consistency over perfection is key for the long haul.
Absolutely. And speaking of consistency, Clear is a big proponent of habit tracking. It provides visual proof of your progress,
Right.
which can be incredibly motivating, and it adds a layer of accountability.
I found that to be true as well. Yeah. Seeing a string of days where I've stuck to, like, my workout routine keeps me motivated to, keep that streak going.
That's a perfect example of how habit tracking can kind of play on our desire for progress and achievement, making those good habits more satisfying. But even with tracking, there will be times when our motivation dips. So how do we ensure those good habits stick even when we're not feeling it?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. What does Clear say about that?
Well, he highlights a crucial concept: make it satisfying. He uses this fascinating example from Pakistan where introducing Safeguard soap, which had a pleasant fragrance and lather, it dramatically improved hand washing rates and overall health outcomes.
So it's not just about the long-term benefits of good habits. We need to find ways to make them feel good in the moment, too. Our brains are wired for instant gratification.
Exactly. It plays into the distinction between immediate rewards and delayed rewards. While good habits often lead to those long-term benefits, we also need to find ways to make them enjoyable in the short term.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not about, like, denying ourselves pleasure altogether. It's about finding those, like, healthy and sustainable ways to incorporate enjoyable experiences into our habit-building journey. But I have another question. Does everyone have the same chance of success with any habit? Or does, like, personality play a role?
That's a great question, and Clear definitely addresses it in the book. He discusses how, like, our genes and personalities can influence our tendencies and preferences. For example, someone who's naturally introverted might find it easier to stick to habits involving, like, solo activities, like reading or writing, compared to someone who's highly extroverted.
So it's not about forcing ourselves into a mold that doesn't fit, but rather understanding our natural inclinations.
Yeah.
And working with them, not against them.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to be someone we're not, we can leverage our unique strengths and personalities to make habit building more effective.
Precisely. It's about finding a game where the odds are in your favor. Working with your natural strengths and tendencies increases the likelihood that you'll enjoy the process. Stay motivated and achieve those remarkable results.
This makes me think about Clear's discussion of the Goldilocks zone of habit formation. Isn't that about, like, finding that sweet spot of challenge that keeps us engaged? Like, if it's too easy, we get bored, but if it's too hard, we get discouraged?
That's exactly it. The Goldilocks rule suggests that we experience, like, peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of our current abilities.
Okay.
Think about a video game that really hooked you. It was challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so difficult that you wanted to, like, rage quit. That's the Goldilocks zone at work.
Oh, I get it. And that makes total sense. I remember when I first started learning to play the guitar, it was so frustrating first. But then I had this, like, aha moment, and suddenly I was hooked.
That aha moment is the magic of the flow state. And it's a key element in maintaining motivation over the long haul. But as habits become more automatic, there's a danger of, like, slipping into mindless repetition, of losing that sense of challenge.
So it's not enough to just build a habit and then, like, coast on autopilot. We need to keep things interesting, push ourselves a little to stay engaged.
Exactly. Clear emphasizes the importance of deliberate practice.
Okay.
Of continuously pushing our boundaries just enough to avoid falling into a rut. Even when a habit becomes second nature, like brushing our teeth or driving a car, there's still room for improvement if we pay attention and actively seek ways to kind of refine the process.
That reminds me of the difference between, like, a good musician and a truly exceptional one. Like, both have mastered the basics, but the exceptional musician continues to hone their skills through dedicated practice and a commitment to constant improvement. They're always pushing those boundaries, seeking that next level of mastery.
You nailed it. And this brings us to another important concept: Clear highlights, reflection and review. He talks about how the Lakers,
the basketball team,
yes, one of the most successful NBA teams, used a system called Career Best Effort, or CBE, to, like, push for continuous improvement. They focus on even the smallest gains in performance, always striving to be just a little bit better.
So even at the professional level, where players are already incredibly skilled, there's that recognition that consistent reflection and a focus on small improvements can lead to significant gains over time. It's not about being perfect. It's about that, like, constant striving.
Yes.
That commitment to getting better even when you're already at the top of your game.
That's a powerful insight. It's about recognizing that even when we're doing well, there's always room to learn,
Right.
adjust and refine our systems. And Clear it encourages us to regularly ask ourselves, what went well, what didn't go so well, and what did I learn?
I love those questions. Yeah, it's so easy to just keep plugging away without pausing to reflect on what's working and what isn't. But taking that step back, that intentional review of our progress, it's so crucial for growth.
Yeah.
It's like taking stock of your inventory,
Yeah.
You need to know what you have, what's selling well, and what needs to be restocked or even discontinued. You can't just keep blindly putting stuff out there and expect it to all work perfectly.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the importance of being mindful and intentional in our approach to habit formation.
Yeah.
It's not just about blindly following a set of rules,
Right.
but about understanding ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, and adjusting our approach as needed.
So we've got this incredible toolkit for building better habits, making them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. We've got strategies for staying motivated, like finding our tribe, reframing our mindset, and using the 2-minute rule. And we've learned the importance of reflection and review for continuous improvement. But even with all these tools at our disposal, those bad habits can be pretty sticky, right? How do we deal with those when they, rear their ugly heads?
They can be, but don't worry. Clear has some strategies for breaking those bad habits as well. He often uses an inversion of the 4 laws we've been discussing. For example, to make a bad habit invisible, you might remove the cues that trigger it from your environment.
So if you're trying to cut back on social media, you might delete those apps from your phone or log out of your accounts on your computer.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're making it more difficult to indulge in the habit by increasing the friction.
Exactly. It's the opposite of what we discussed for making good habits easy. And to make a bad habit unattractive, you might highlight its negative consequences.
Instead of focusing on that temporary pleasure of endlessly scrolling through social media, you might remind yourself of how it's eating up your time and preventing you from focusing on more meaningful activities.
You got it. And for those really tough habits, Clear suggests using commitment devices.
I've heard of those. Aren't those pre-commitments that make it harder to back out of a desired action? Like putting your money where your mouth is?
Exactly. They're basically ways to kind of lock in future behavior by increasing the cost of inaction. Think about those automatic savings plans where a portion of your paycheck is directly deposited into your savings account. You've essentially removed the temptation to spend that money because it's already out of sight, out of mind.
That's a great example. Yeah, you're leveraging those good intentions before those tempting alternatives can even enter the picture. I like that. But what about those moments when we slip up? Even with all these strategies in place, how do we deal with those inevitable setbacks? It's easy to feel discouraged and, want to throw in the towel.
That's where self-compassion comes in. Clear reminds us that failure is a part of the process, and it's how we respond to those setbacks that ultimately determines our success. It's not about beating ourselves up for making a mistake, but rather viewing it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And getting right back on track.
That's such a crucial reminder. Yeah, we need to be kind to ourselves, especially when we're trying to make changes in our lives. And speaking of getting back on track, Clear talks about the importance of building a system for accountability, right?
Yes. He suggests creating a habit contract.
Okay.
A written or verbal agreement where you state your commitment to a habit and the consequences of not following through. Then you find 1 or 2 people to act as your accountability partners and sign off on the contract.
So you're adding a social cost to those bad habits by making your promises public and holding yourself accountable to others.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a powerful motivator.
It definitely can be. It plays on our kind of natural desire for approval and our aversion to letting others down. And when combined with those other strategies for breaking bad habits, it can significantly increase your chances of success.
Wow. We've covered so much ground already. From the 4 laws of behavior change, the importance of understanding our personalities and finding our Goldilocks zone. We've explored strategies for making good habits stick and breaking bad ones. It's a lot to take in. But I'm curious, what does Clear say about the ultimate purpose of all this habit building? What's the end goal?
Well, Clear argues that the real reason habits matter is because they help us become the type of person we want to be. They shape our identity.
So it's not just about achieving specific outcomes like losing weight or writing a book, but about those habits contributing to a larger vision of ourselves.
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions with our desired identity. He He emphasizes that every time we perform a habit, we're casting a vote for the type of person we want to become.
That's such a powerful way to think about it. It's not just about like checking things off a to-do list. It's about those actions contributing to a larger vision of ourselves. Each choice we make, each habit we cultivate, it's a brushstroke in the masterpiece of our lives.
Beautifully said. It's about building a life that reflects our values and aspirations.
Yeah.
A life that feels authentic and fulfilling. And habits are the building blocks of that life.
Okay, so we need to be mindful of how our habits are shaping our identity. But what about those times when we feel stuck, when we're struggling to make progress, even with all these strategies in place? Those moments of like doubt and discouragement can be so tough to navigate. Does Clear offer any advice for dealing with those?
He does. He reminds us that the process of building better habits is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about making small, consistent improvements over time, embracing the long game, and understanding that real change takes time and effort.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the importance of patience and perseverance.
So it's about focusing on the process rather than getting caught up in chasing like some distant finish line.
Exactly. It's about those small wins along the way, those moments when we choose the healthier option, resist the temptation, or simply show up for ourselves even when we don't feel like it.
That's so reassuring. Yeah, it takes the pressure off needing to make massive leaps overnight.
Yeah.
And allows us to appreciate those small victories that pave the way for lasting change.
And those small victories, those 1% gains, they accumulate into significant results over time. Success isn't about achieving perfection, it's about making progress.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. It's not about being flawless. It's about that continuous striving, that commitment to getting a little bit better each day. But isn't there a danger of becoming too attached to our habits? Like becoming rigid and inflexible in our routines?
There is, and Clear acknowledges this. He reminds us that habits are tools.
Okay.
And like any tool, they can be used for good or for ill. He encourages us to regularly reflect on our habits and to be willing to adjust them as needed.
So it's about maintaining that sense of flexibility, right? Like being willing to experiment and let go of habits that are no longer serving us, even if we've been doing them for years.
Precisely. Our needs and goals, they evolve, right? And our habits should reflect those changes. It's about approaching habit formation with curiosity and a willingness to adapt. View your habits as a dynamic system, constantly evolving and refining itself as we grow and learn.
It's not about striving for some, like, static ideal, but embracing that ongoing process of self-discovery and improvement. Clear's approach to habit formation is incredibly empowering.
It is. He reminds us we have the power to shape our lives through, daily choices. Even small changes can lead to remarkable results. He emphasizes that building better habits is a journey worth taking, one that can lead to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
I love that. It's a message of hope and possibility. A reminder that we're not bound by our past or current circumstances. We have the power to create the future. We desire one small habit at a time. But there's one thing that really struck me towards the end of the book. He talks about how happiness isn't about achieving some ultimate state of pleasure, but rather about the absence of desire. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a profound concept. He's essentially saying happiness arises when we're content with our current state, when we no longer crave something different. It ties back to the habit loop we've been discussing. A craving only occurs after we've noticed an opportunity, a cue suggesting a potential reward.
So if we can learn to manage our desires, be more mindful of the cues that trigger those cravings, we can create a more balanced and fulfilling life.
That's the key. It's about recognizing happiness isn't some, fixed destination, but a state of being cultivated through daily choices, the habits we build, and the thoughts we choose to focus on.
Wow. We covered so much ground today. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway from our deep dive into atomic habits?
For me, it's the power of compounding. Those tiny adjustments to our daily routines, consistent effort over time, even in small increments, can lead to remarkable results.
I love that. It's a message of hope and possibility. We're all capable of creating positive change in our lives, one small step at a time. And for me, the biggest takeaway is the importance of building systems, those consistent processes that support us in becoming the type of person we want to be.
So it's not about setting these lofty goals and hoping for the best, but about creating a solid foundation of habits and routines that will guide us towards our desired destination.
Exactly. And those systems, those atomic habits, should be tailored to our unique personalities, strengths, and values. It's about working with ourselves, not against ourselves.
Absolutely. And we can't forget the importance of reflection, regularly stepping back to review our progress, make adjustments, and ensure that our habits are still serving us well.
It's about being intentional, taking ownership of our choices, and recognizing that we have the power to shape our lives through the habits we cultivate. Well, I don't know about you, but my brain is officially full. This deep dive into atomic habits has been incredibly insightful.
I agree. It's a book packed with wisdom and practical strategies for anyone who's, serious about improving their lives.
Absolutely. If you're listening and feeling inspired, I challenge you to think about one habit you'd like to master. Tonight, before you go to sleep, write down one tiny step you can take tomorrow to make that habit more obvious. Small wins lead to big changes.
And be sure to check out James Clear's Atomic Habits for a deeper dive into these concepts.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.